Hello and welcome to the start of a series of Go Django videos. It's going to cover how to create a modern website using Django. And what I mean by modern website is a site that actually does something for its users other than display static content. The premise behind this site is we're going to tell our users when they need to do maintenance on their bikes. On average, you should probably do maintenance every 1,000 miles of riding. So we're going to connect to a third-party website where we track our rides, and then when we reach 1,000 miles, we're going to notify our users, hey, you've ridden 1,000 miles, you need to go ahead and get your bike in for some maintenance. How we're going to accomplish this is we need to set up a website that does account registration and all the bits around that, like login and password recovery. We also need to associate our account on our website with a third-party website, in this case Strava. And then we need to pull down that data from Strava so that we can actually do processing on it. From there, once we do the processing on it, once we realize, hey, we've gone 1,000 miles since our last maintenance, then we need to go ahead and notify our users, and we're going to notify them through email and text message. And then finally, we're going to do custom settings for our users so they can go in and tweak when they get notified and how they get notified. This isn't just going to be a 5-video series. This is going to be quite a few more because we're going to cover a lot of topics. As such, I'm going to do things off screen, and I'll just tell you what I've done. And those kinds of things are, I'm going to build out templates so that we don't spend time working on those because it's all basic HTML. If there's anything complex, I'll just walk you through it in the video. Another thing might be we're going to use Celery. I've already done a video on setting up and configuring Celery, so I'm not going to go through that in this video. And then the same thing with using Jinja. You can find links in the show notes on each of these things, and then anything in the future that I do off screen, I'll link to a video of it as well. So with that, let's go ahead and get started with our video. And the first thing that we're going to do is our account registration stuff. With starting out our site, we're only going to do a few things. In this video, we're going to allow us to go to a web page on our dashboard to make sure that we're logged in. We're going to allow for logging in, logging out, and registering an account. In the next video, we'll actually deal with being able to change your password and recover your password. This video is going to cover all built-in authentication stuff with Django Auth. Except in our case, we're going to use bits and pieces of it. We're not going to use the views that Django provides by default. The reason we're not going to do that is because most of the time when I see projects, everyone wants to do something custom. So I just want to go ahead and walk you through how to do all the bits and pieces so you can do anything custom that you need to. For our part, we're going to do everything fairly basically, and we're just going to put these in class-based views so you can kind of get an idea of how to handle authentication and registration and those types of things in case you want to do something custom in some of your applications. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to go into our URLs for our accounts. We have this linked in our main URLs to /accounts. And we're going to add our dashboard URL, and this is going to go to our dashboard view, and then we're naming it dashboard. This is something that we can go to after we log in and we get more information about whatever we want to show. In this case, we'll probably show recent activity and any notifications that are coming, and then probably how close we are to our next maintenance schedule. But we'll cover that specific stuff in a future video. In this case, we're just getting some of our skeleton of our site in place. So for that, we need to create a view. So we're going to create a template view, and we're going to call it dashboard, and we're going to give it the template name, in this case accounts dashboard. We also want to go ahead and make sure you only get there when you're logged in, so we're going to use Django Braces login required mixin. I really recommend you take a look at Django Braces because there's a lot of mixins that are fairly self-explanatory that you can just drop in and use with your views without much effort. In this case, login required means that if you're not logged in, it's going to redirect you to the login page. We're also going to cover 3 other views. In this case, we're going to do account registration view, a login view, and a logout view. We also need to set up the URLs for these, and they're going to be there accordingly. And then finally, since we already have them set up in our templates, we need to go ahead and just add 2 other views, password recovery view and settings view. We aren't going to actually go through those in this video. That'll be in the next. And then we'll go ahead and add these to our URLs file as well. That way, when we go to use our templates, it knows how to fill in that information. So with that, let's go ahead and actually run our project for the first time. So as you can see, we have a basic web page and we're on a home page. We have our logo and we have a login. If we click on login, actually errors out because it doesn't know anything about anything on what to do with a login page. But we can go to our admin and we can see that we can log in just fine there. And we can actually go to our dashboard, which required us to log in before. So with that, let's go ahead and jump into our views and start filling our login view out. So we're going to add our template name. We're going to add our form class of authentication form. This is a built-in form in Django, and so we don't need to do any custom. We don't need to build this out ourselves. And then we're going to give it a success URL where we want to go to dashboard whenever it's done. Notice we use reverse lazy. This is so that it can evaluate after everything is done processing, but we can still set it in here instead of overriding get success URL method. And then we're going to override the form valid method of our form view so that we can proceed with logging in our user. This is where you actually have to know a little bit about how the authentication form works. So basically what happens is if the form is valid, then we need to get the user from this form. So we'll do user equals form.getUser. So that gets our user object. Then we do auth login and we give it our request and we give it our user. From there, Django takes care of handling all the bits and pieces of logging in our user. And then finally, we just return our form valid so it goes and continues up the stack. The auth login, if we'll look at that, is actually something built into Django. And if you look at the top, we have Django contrib auth import login as auth login. This is a built-in function that Django just handles it, and you just pass it in the current request and the user. And it takes care of setting all of the session stuff with the appropriate backend that you set. In this case, by default, Django contrib auth. So with that, we should actually be ready to jump into our browser and log in. So if we go to our login page, we have our login form. We can log in with our current user, and there we go. We go to our dashboard. The next thing let's do is go ahead and fill out our logout. In this case, we're using a redirect view so that we can redirect to an appropriate place after we've logged our user out. We want to set our permanent to be false, and we want to go ahead and do that because in Django 1.8, this is actually the default. In Django 1.7, permanent is set to true. Then we're going to give the URL that we want to redirect to be home, and then we're going to override the get method on our redirect view. This way we can actually do processing. Then we're just going to do auth logout and pass it the current request, and Django's going to handle logging out the user. So now we should be able to successfully log in and log out of our site. So if we'll jump into our browser and hit logout, you'll see that we log out just fine. And then if we'll go back in and try to log in, you can see, hey, we log in. So now we have two of the basic functions of our site actually complete. And it's actually not been a lot of work. So the final thing that we're going to look at is actually registering an account. This one is a little more complex, but not a lot. We're going to set our template name, and we're going to do accounts register. We're going to do our form class, and we're going to use the user create form. This is actually a custom form that we have, and I'll go over that here in a second. Then we're going to set our success URL for our dashboard like normal. And then we're going to override our form valid method, and we're going to get our saved user whenever we do a form.save. From there, we're going to authenticate our user using Django's authenticate method, and we're going to pass it in our username, and we're going to pass it in the password from our form that we used. And then finally we're going to log the user in after they've registered. It is possible to go ahead and create the user and not authenticate them and not log them in. In that case, we would just use a simple create view here, and you wouldn't even need the form valid. In this case, we generally like to go ahead and log our users in, so we need to authenticate the user, and that step is not in our registration form, so we have to do it manually. And then we need to go ahead and log the user in if the authentication worked. And then from there, we're just going to do a response redirect of our success URL. So now let's go ahead and take a look at our form of our user create form. In this case, we're inheriting from user creation form because it actually takes care of a lot of information for us. It does a lot for us. The only thing that we want to do is we want to go ahead and add a field for email so that we can require an email whenever our users register. This will really help since we want to be able to email our users when they need to do maintenance on their bikes. So in the meta, we're using the user class, and then we're going ahead and setting the fields that we want to see of username, email, password 1, and password 2. And then finally in our save, because we need to override what actually happens so we can save the email, we're saving the user, but we're not committing it yet. So then we're setting the email, and then we're going to go ahead and commit our user and actually save it. And then finally we'll return the user so that we can use it properly over in the form valid in our views, where we do saved user equals form.save. I really recommend that you go through and read some of the documentation on the authenticate method, the login method, and the logout method that's built into Django. I'm sure some of it is a little bit overwhelming of why you need to go through it. It makes sense when you look at it, but I would really recommend going in and reading some of the documentation to understand the in and outs of what's going on. So with that, let's go ahead and test it out in our browser. So if we'll go into our browser and we'll click on register, add our information, and try to sign up, you'll see we get an error because the username is already in place. Let's go ahead and try a username that isn't there and try to register, and you'll see we'll get registered and we log in and are redirected to our dashboard. And then finally we can log out like normal. And that's it. That's all there is to setting up and allowing your users to log in, log out, go to their dashboard, and register an account. It's fairly basic. I recommend that you look through some of the code in the show notes and rewatch this video and give things a shot yourself and play around. Please stick around for the next episode where we go over password recovery and doing a settings page so you can actually change your password.